further. Okay, so we're going to start this morning talking about the 4-H name and emblem, and I would like to just let you guys know that there is, with the 4-H name and emblem, we do have protections on it, and so we're going to go over these, and I'm going to share some documents with you as well. So the first thing, it is protected under a federal statute. It is, if you look at the emblem itself, the 4-H clover, you'll see that 18 USC 707, and that is actually the federal statute that it is. It's Title 18 USC 707. And okay, my video is driving me crazy. I keep seeing that it's flickering, so I'm going to switch. Sorry, I'm going to switch it really quick and take it off. Not my choice, but I'm taking it off HD. Okay. So, and what that means is we cannot change the emblem in any way. So, essentially, you cannot use the words 4-H club, 4-H clubs, or use the 4-H, the clover, without being authorized to do that. So if there is somebody that does, then there's a fine of up to $5,000 for individuals and up to $10,000 for organizations. And there are guidelines with this. I've actually had one person throughout my career, it doesn't happen very often, but I've had one person turned into USDA for supposedly misusing the clover. Now, as we investigated it a little bit further, it was one of those, it was a business, we had a business in Idaho that it was a meat packing plant essentially, and it was a rival meat packing plant, and I saw the ad on TV. I saw it and went, I don't think they're supposed to do that, but the rival meat packing plant, what they did is they had this great ad about, come to the fair, buy a 4-H or FFA animal, we buy 4-H we support 4-H and FFA. We buy the animals and sell the meat in our retail store. Essentially, they were so the rival company turned them into USDA. All we did was, in that case, they didn't get fined, they didn't get sent to jail. What happened was USDA contacted me, and we turned around and just sent them a letter that says, you can't do this, you need to have permission. Essentially, businesses cannot use the clover for personal profit or personal gain. So they can't use it in advertising and those types of things. The other one, so I actually, just in the last 6 months, actually did turn somebody into USDA for the clover misuse. And it was more of a person that had a t-shirt business, and they were creating t-shirts for 4-H that, and it was purely personal profit for the company. And what they were doing was trying to skirt around the issue where they were using 4-H without the dash in the middle. They were just doing 4-H, and it was a different font. And I was like, 4-H, the 4-H does not have a font that they have to use, but it's taking the dash out of the middle. And then also they were using the clover without the H's in it. It was still the 4-H clover, but it just didn't have the H's in it. And so to me, that was misusing, that was purely using it for personal profit. And the message that they were sending was not really necessarily a message I felt was appropriate for the 4-H program. So we do, so that happens. We've had, and I'm going to talk about how we give authorization, but we do have companies, I have had a bakery in a town that wanted to make cookies with the 4-H clover on it and sell them in their store. and they asked permission, you know, which was great, but they were, this wasn't, I wasn't in charge, but they were denied that permission because number one, they, you know, it was purely profit for them, and then it was also, you know, again, it was purely profit. But we had another one where we had a chocolate company in a town that one of the counties got a great idea to start making 4-H candy bars. So they were like a round circle with the 4-H clover stamped in the middle. And they asked for permission to use, or, you know, they had asked permission to use the 4-H name and emblem. But that money, you know, they were producing the candy bar, but it was a fundraiser for the 4-H program. So that you know, it wasn't purely profit for their business. And so they were granted permission. Now, when I left that state and moved to another state, I thought, oh, what a great idea. I'd love to get those candy bars and give those away for gifts, you know, for like guest speakers and that type of thing. Well, what happened with that is they had permission to do it within the state, but they didn't have permission to sell them beyond state lines. So I couldn't get them. It was really kind of sad. With our permission for the 4-H name and emblem, just so you two are aware of what, oh, it looks like we have lots of people on now. Good. Oops, sorry. With the permission for the use of the name and emblem, if you have a club, when they are chartered, they automatically, that is what gives them permission to use the 4-H name and emblem. It's that charter, or an affiliate group or whatever. If you have, like if you're making t-shirts in your community and you want to, you know, you want to put the Clover on it, or if you have clubs doing that, then if they're not going to be sold outside of the county lines, then you as the 4-H staff person can give that permission to the county or give the permission for that company to use the 4-H name and emblem. If they are going to go beyond, and anything within your county, if it's not going to reach beyond the county level, then you can give that permission. If it goes beyond county boundaries, then you do have to ask for, then they do have to go through the state, and then you would send that request to me, and I would give that permission. And so the other piece, and then if it goes beyond state lines, except for in the case of where we do have a couple of counties that like I know White Pine works with, we have 4-Hers in Utah that it's just part of the 4-H program because our extension service actually does service, you know, they do provide services for the part of the state in Utah. Same thing would be some of these bordering counties, you know, I think I see Sharon's on, and I know Sharon, you know, you don't, at McDermott, I mean, that's kind of there's nothing between McDermott and Jordan Valley really for you to work. You know, Elizabeth, I know we talked yesterday briefly about, you know, possibly, you know, having some 4-Hers in Idaho, maybe that would come down, especially, you know, up in the northern area or even the Utah line. In those cases, no. If there are 4-Hers coming into our program, we don't need to get that permission nationally. But it's just if we were going to do something like with the candy bars, we would need to get, if we wanted to sell something across state lines, we would have to get permission. Or in the case of that ad that I was talking about a couple of minutes ago with the livestock, that actually did cross state lines because it happened in Twin Falls County, which is right on the border. And I know that I believe Elko does get some of their news from, they can pick up, or Jackpot picks up Twin Falls news, and that does cross that state line. So in those cases, that's where we would need to go with USDA. A lot of times too, what happens is I have questions about the 4-H name and emblem. Like people will send me graphics and say, is this legal? Most of the time I can tell you, but sometimes, in fact, I just had this last week where I was just kind of on the fence. I wasn't 100% sure if it was legal or not. So I just shipped it off to USDA, and Jim at USDA gave me a yes, that's good to go, or sometimes he'll say no, that's not, you know, you can't use it that way. So, you know, if you ever have questions about if the clover is legal or not too, you can just, you know, just shoot me a quick email and I will look at it and tell you, or I will get a second opinion. So with the name and emblem, just a couple of things about this. One, you cannot change the coloring. So, you know, and these are, honestly, these are three that I used to use all the time. I love the gradient, you know, the gradient look of the clover, you know, where it's dark in the middle and goes light. Can't do that. You can't. I love the marbled look. That looks really cool. Can't do it. And then you cannot have it another color either. That's the other stipulation. So some of you have heard the story about my experience I was doing this workshop about the 4-H name and emblem one day for a group of new educators this was when I was in North Dakota, and we were in the middle of our 4-H teen conference, like Discover Your Future here in Nevada. And I was the advisor for, you know, that was one of my responsibilities, was that conference. And so I'm sitting there giving this presentation, and I have on the t-shirt for the event. And they said, you mean you're not supposed to use it like you have it on your t-shirt? And I looked down, and on my t-shirt, we had navy blue t-shirts with turquoise writing on them. And on the front, it was okay, but there was a great big on the sleeve, turquoise Clover. Didn't even dawn on any of us that we had a turquoise Clover on it. And so, you know, no, I wasn't going to be thrown in jail. No, I wasn't going to be given a fine, but you have to be, you know, cognizant of some of those things. You know, I was at a state robotics competition, and we had one of our 4-H robotics teams that was competing had these really cool, they were from a little tiny rural county, and they had these great camouflage t-shirts with their, you know, in bright blaze orange. They had the name of their club, they had, you know, and a bright blaze orange Clover. I mean, big on the front of the t-shirt. And so the person that was in charge of robotics actually for the state, went to them and said, you know, you need to talk to them. They cannot have that on their Clover or on their shirts. Sometimes I feel like I'm the fun police when it comes to that, but, you know, I'm trying to protect our image and our reputation, and also protect the Clover and protect any of our people from getting into trouble. So the other thing that you can't do, and this is something I was guilty of when I first started my career all the time, you cannot use the Clover as a watermark. When you're doing newsletters or mailings or something, it looks so cool to put the Clover, you know, behind and then have, you know, your words on top. Can't do it. Not allowed. I'm sorry. I wish we could, but it's, you know, like I said, it's just not allowed. So as you look at these Clovers, you know, just kind of general guidelines within the chat box, if you can, oh, you only see the title page. Okay. It's not doing, sorry guys. Thanks for letting me know that, Elizabeth, and I don't know, I'm going to stop sharing and try to get this. Okay. Sorry guys. Because you can't see what I'm doing. I'm going to go back a little bit. Okay, let me see if this, okay, can you guys see the what's wrong with these Clovers now? Okay, good. I'm going to go back really quick and show you. Okay, so that one. So here's what I said. Here's what I was talking about with the, you know, what you can't do with the Clovers. So you can't make it gradiated, you can't make it marbled, and you can't do the orange Clovers. So, and then you can't use it as a watermark. So you can't put it behind text, even if it's really light colored. And then what's wrong with these Clovers? So you can see with this one, you know, they've inserted, I've seen this a lot, where they take the Clover and then they put the name of their 4-H club across the front of the Clover. and you cannot do that. Again, you know, you can't have anything over the top writing wise. With this clover, can you see what's wrong with this clover? Can anybody tell? You can type it in the chat box. Nope, it's not the shade of green. That's actually the right shade of green. Okay, the words are on the bottom. It's stretched. Yep. So if you look at it, it is it's stretched horizontally. So it's too wide. So when you're readjusting the yeah, it's okay, Liz. That's why I'm showing you some of these things. When you're adjusting the clover, and if you look at this one that says 4-H Club 2, it actually is goofy as well. But make sure that you grab the corner of the box. You don't, you know, like, okay, you've got the boxes, and there's a 4 corners, and then you know how you have where you can grab it and stretch it on the, you know, on the lines. Don't grab those. Make sure you always grab it at the corner and stretch it that way, because that will keep it proportional. And then this one is squished. So it's squished vertically or horizontally, or you can say it's, you know, they made it too tall. So on these are all, and I'll tell you, I found all of these online. All I do is I just typed in 4-H, you know, 4-H Clover, clip art, and all of these pulled up. When you look at this Cedar Rapids 4-H Club one, what's the problem with that one? Can anybody tell me? Okay, no, the dots are, well, the dots aren't really okay. The color's a little off. The biggest issue with that one is actually the fact that that club is over the top of part of the clover. That's what caught my attention the first time. There needs to be white space between the 4-H clover and the rest of the graphic. I'm going to go, let me show you really quick what I mean by that. Sorry, I'm going to go back to the front page. See, if you look at this front page where it's got the puzzle pieces looking on it, if you notice around, because I always kind of questioned this, and they said, no, it's actually legal because there's enough white space between the clover and the actual graphic. So that's what I mean by there needs to be white space. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna, okay. So the same thing with this clover down on the bottom, with the animals coming out around it. It actually, the outline of it is not enough white space. What they needed to do was put, if they wanted to do something like this, they needed to make it that white space bigger. It needs to be probably at least what the one that I just showed you was. The keep con and 4-H on, you see this a lot. You see this phrase a lot on t-shirts and stuff. Again, can't be over the top of the clover. And then the same with the little doggy jumping, you know, over the clovers. Again, something superimposed on top of the clover. And then when you look at the 3 clovers down below, this one, first of all, they're not an official 4-H clover. If you look at how it is, look at the structure of it, you know, the leaves are a lot smaller than what is in our typical 4-H, you know, in our 4-H name and emblem. And also it does not have the USC or the 18 USC 707 on them. So all of these are illegal. Now with the clover, there can be, you can have it in multiple colors. So not multiple colors, you can have it in green. You can green with white H's. Sorry, there's one that's missing. You can have it black with white H's. You can have metallic gold, as you can see in the example of the belt buckle. And then also it can be white with with black H's. Now, it really should not, if you're having it printed on a t-shirt or something to that effect, you should not have it be, you should not, I've seen it to where it says you can have the colors showing from below, but I would suggest not. I would always suggest having the white H's and not even worrying about that, just making sure, you know, or the black H's. So, and the thing about, so, you know, I know it seems a little daunting at times with this, but I want to share with you, we do have resources available for you. There is, I'm going to try to pull, oh, nope, it's not going to let me. I know it's not. Okay. Actually, I'm going to finish the PowerPoint and then I'm going to go in and show you the documents. That'll be easier. So essentially, there is a website, and this is the website for there's a user's guide for non-extension users. So those would be your businesses. Those, I know, the other one I was going to share with, the other example I was going to share with you. So there's a silversmith here in Nevada that I met with this fall, or this summer, about you know, about using or ordering belt buckles. And you know, and they've been doing this for years. And my first question was, you know, do you have permission from USD, or where do you sell to? And they sell all over the United States. They sell into Canada. They sell, and I said, do you have permission from USDA to use the 4-H name and emblem? And they were like, what? They had no idea that they had to do it. So I printed off this book for the user's guide for non-extension users and gave it to them. You know, I'm not going to turn them into USDA. I'm not going to, you know, I want them. And they worked through the process, and now they have permission to use the 4-H name and emblem. Everything is good. So just so, you know, you guys are aware, you know, sometimes we run into those companies. I know that there's a few companies that are 4-H, you know, our counties, our 4-H programs use. And I would suggest to you, before you, you know, I would make sure that they do have that permission to use the 4-H name and emblem. And then there's the user's guide for extension professionals. So, and that's what I'm going to show you right now. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. And I am going to go back to sharing. And if you guys have questions on this, please, you know, don't hesitate to ask. Okay. So I'm hoping that you can see the booklet that says 4-H name and emblem, 4-H professionals handbook. So with this, essentially it goes into all of the criteria. It tells you, sorry, I'm going to go quickly through this part. There is and it tells you how you get permission to use the 4-H name and emblem. It also gives you information about your responsibilities as a 4-H professional. And then it gives you in here, let's see, text review. You know, this is actually one of the best that I've seen in a really long time. Somewhere it tells you what color, because there is a certain color of green that you're supposed to use. Sorry, I'm trying to, I don't see it now. Graphic. Okay, this shows you, oh, here we go. So if you're using one color printing, it requires, the green color is PMS 347. Now, I did learn, I don't remember where I was at, but I did find out from somebody that some companies, when you tell them PMS 347 green, it comes out to be like this seafoam green color. And so you need to double check that before you have everything printed. So I think that that is really important for people. So, and then it also gives you, you know, if you're looking at that 347, you know, PMS 347, it tells you what the percentage of colors is. And so that does help, you know, and then also if you're doing video or electronic media. The other piece I wanted, with the 18 USC 707 code, on here, there's two places that it can be. It can either be below next to the stem, or it needs to be up on the leaf, like bordering that leaf. Those are the two places that it can be, and those are the only two places that it can be. And then the other one that I wanted to share with you was the, this one is a lot more extensive, honestly. This is the name and emblem, the user guide for non-extension entities. So it is, what is this one? Oh, I guess it's only 13 pages. It's actually not as much, but this will give you, this gives individuals who want to use the name and emblem, it gives them a lot more information. And these are both found on the NIFA website, and like I gave you guys the web address in the PowerPoint, and I will do what I've done every time with the PowerPoint, and I will share, I'll put them in the Nevada box and then share the files with the recording and everything. So any questions on the 4-H name and emblem? Whoa, I just lost you guys. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I lost you for a second. Okay. So I'm trying to pull up my chat box too so I can see what everybody's saying. Okay, if there's no questions, then, and like I said before, if you ever have, and I would highly suggest that you before your clubs print t-shirts, etc., I would have them run the design by you as a 4-H staff person. I know several counties that do this, and it really does help, so that clubs aren't printing up a whole bunch of t-shirts and then all of a sudden, you know, we come back and say, you can't use that. So, because, you know, once in a while, and I try not to do it very often, I really do, like I said, sometimes I feel like the fun police, or the Clover Cop. I've been called that many, many times. But sometimes I'll run across something on Facebook that a club has used, and it's not like I'm out stalking. It just happens to come up on my feed on Facebook, or I might, you know, I try to keep, you know, like as many of our 4-H clubs and as many of our counties as I can. But what happens is you know, something will come up and I'm like, oh, we can't do that. And so I'll email the county, you know, I'll email you guys and let you know, hey, you need to talk to him. You know, this is what I'm seeing, you know. And, you know, if I need to talk to him, I can, but I just want to make sure that, you know, I don't, you know, I just want to keep everybody out of trouble. So I would suggest having your clubs run their t-shirt designs by you as the county level first. Okay. All right, we're going to talk. This is always such a fun session because I get to talk about the fun ones. The next one we're going to talk about is the risk management. And I put this one more in the beginning of the orientation sessions because I think it's really important that our 4-H staff have a good handle on risk management in the beginning of your career. You know, even if it's within the first year of your career. And, you know I've got Marissa and Sharon and Samantha on here, and, you know, hopefully I usually try to share new things as we're going, but you know, I think it's really important. This topic especially, it's not fun, but it's just something that I feel is critical for us. So we are going to, okay. All right. Just double checking that you guys see the managing risk for 4-H youth development. And I can't find my chat box. Where did it go? Okay, there we go. Can everybody see that, the Managing Risk for 4-H Youth Development PowerPoint? Okay, thank you. I just, like I said, it's trying to get used to the new system, my new computer and the new way it works. So, okay, so when you think about risk, what is risk? It's a chance of loss. You know, this picture to me really does define what risk is. We have to make it fun if we're talking about risk. So what kind of risks do we take? We take risks in the morning we take risks by getting out of bed in the morning. We take risks by drinking a cup of coffee. You know, we all know about the lawsuit for McDonald's and the hot cup of coffee. We take a risk driving to and from work, and I think across the state today, it almost sounds like it was a risk driving to and from work. And we also, you know, as 4-H professionals, we have kind of taken on the responsibility of running a program that involves youngsters who are in need of adequate and basic safety and handling and training, both of firearms, mechanical devices, with animals, with everything that we do. And those young people, those firearms and those mechanical devices and really those animals, the sewing machine, etc., have no thought process or concern for safety. So we have to think about that. Even the young people don't have really as concern for safety. They tend to just kind of do what they want to do. So risk management is the process of use to protect our assets by minimizing the potential for negative outcomes. So we need to think about what potential negative outcomes are before the event happens. Now we cannot predict everything, but we need to try to, hopefully you'll have some tools that you can then help figure that out. Risk is also the uncertainty of future events that threatens our organization and our ability to our mission, to accomplish our mission. And also we have to think about what is the reputation. Sometimes something happens and we just can't help it. But we need to try to think about some of those things. But again, unexpected things happen. So why is it important? It's really important because we need to ensure our job is to provide, and we're going to talk about this in the essential elements portion later, but our job is to provide a physically and emotionally safe environment for all of our participants, whether they be youth or adults. It's also helps us evaluate our allocation of resources. If we're doing a program that is very expensive, but we realize that it's costing us also a lot of money, maybe we decide that the risk of that is not critical anymore. We need to look at that allocation. And also with the allocation too, if we need to, I think about the 4-H camp, and a lot of times we have to assess the risk and assess what we need to do in order to make it a safer environment. And part of that is maybe we need to reallocate funds to fix something rather than, buy something fun. But it also becomes important in our educational component of our work. We need to, if we can focus on the safety and the prevention before the event or before the activity or whatever, then when we're at that educational event, we don't have to think about it, and we can have fun, and we can provide that good education. And then also, it's practicing good risk management allows us to focus on our mission. So there's 4 different kinds of risk. Essentially, you have physical risk, which is going to cause bodily harm. You have reputation risk, which is the risk of losing confidence or trust in the organization. So that's where we need to think about what we say. We need to think about how we act, both for our young people. That's why we're also always telling our 4-Hers, when you use a facility that we don't own, per se. You leave it in better shape than you found it. You know, just because there was garbage dumped all over the floor when you got there, your job is to pick up that garbage and take it out. We don't want people to think, oh gosh, we don't want those 4-Hers again. You know, they don't do, you know, they don't clean up their mess. They're rude. They're, you know, so we need to think about it that way. There's also emotional risk. You know, the risk of participants feeling upset, uncomfortable, embarrassed, those types of things. One example with that is, everybody knows, you know, the fun thing when you lose something, either at camp or a conference or some type of event. If you lose your name tag or you lose your folder or whatever, it's always fun to get that person up and they have to do something to get that item back, whether it be sing a song, or I've actually had them, they were writing their names with their butts. You know, it's a whole variety of things. Well, let's think about that for just a second. And what about the emotional? And now, granted, there are some kids that they will lose something or they'll purposefully lose something so they can do that. But we do have a bulk, you know, a lot of our kids that's emotionally a risk for them. You know, they're very uncomfortable, they're embarrassed. And so we need to think about those types of activities at those, you know, that's a big one at camp. And so I actually have, this is horrible, but we had at our teen conference at one of the states I was in, we had 5 kids lose their name tags, I think was what it was. And they got up on stage and they were writing their names with their butts. And this was less than 5 years ago, writing their names with their butts. And I promptly walked down, and I had told them before it even started, I said, there will be none of that. You know, I just can't, as a youth development professional, I cannot allow that to happen. And I walked down and said, you will stop this right now. I mean, I probably embarrassed the volunteer that was in charge of that portion, but I said, I told you guys before this started that this would not be allowed, and it is not allowed. And so, so they didn't do it, you know, any of the rest of the time. Yeah, it's fun, but again, we have to think about our spectrum of young people. If you have somebody, you know, that is on the autism spectrum, they're probably not going to feel emotionally safe in that, but they're probably going to lose their name tag. So think about emotionally safe. And then we also have financially safe. You know, I know, I just had to send out the email the other day about posting things on Facebook, posting JPEGs on Facebook of, you know, if it's just a picture or just a save the date. Save the date's even a little questionable, but we have to, if we're doing forms and that type of thing, you know, that's a financial risk for us by having those posted, because the fines for that are so high, I don't have enough money to cover it. And so we have to think about some of those risks. So some important terms about risk management. Liability. So liability is you're legally bound or responsible. So somebody, you know, something for which one is liable. So it might be an obligation, a responsibility, or a debt. We are obligated to provide accessible documents to our clientele. We are obligated, if we have somebody with a disability, we have to do every reasonable and prudent way to work with them. Now, sometimes it's just not possible, but we have to make every reasonable effort. And then some other forms, negligence. These are, you know, if we fail to use the degree of care which an ordinary person of reasonable prudence. So if they're, you know, have common sense, then they would use under a given situation. If you're using a building and it may not be owned by 4-H, but you're using that building and the steps going inside are broken and, you know, somebody's going to fall through. You need to let the people who own the building know that, you know, hey, this step is broken. you know, this leaves us liable, it leaves you liable, and what can we do, you know, to fix it? Whether, you know, and if they refuse to fix it, then you need to find another facility. It can also be assault and battery. It can be false arrest and imprisonment, invasion of privacy, defamation. So that would be if you're talking about somebody or if somebody's talking about us. And then a violation of our constitutional rights. Those are all forms of liability. So there's 4 risk management strategies. So the first one is to reduce reduce the risk. So you're lessening the extent or the amount of that, or you're removing the risks or the hazards. So an example here in this picture is you're modifying the program or the facility. So this one is actually, this picture is from the grizzly bear. It's the grizzly bear research station, a research facility at Washington State University. It is fantastic. So much fun to go and watch the grizzly bears, and you know, they put them out and they run and they play and they, you know, but you can see all of the things that they have done to provide us, you know, to reduce the risk. There's the interior fences, and then there is actually a second exterior fence that nobody is allowed to go into. But you know, that gives that double barrier. And then it also, they have the sign up that says, you know, danger, wild animals, do not approach, etc. Because sometimes if you look at that kind of the cement area, that alleyway, there actually are a lot of times bears in that area. But you know, again, that's one way. But one for us would be, and this is so funny because I've actually seen this where I've gone to a county show and they do not have like panels or anything up for the arena. They don't even have stakes in the ground with a rope. They just have, you know, this area is designated for the beef show, and you know, they just walk in a circle. Well, one thing, you know, that's pretty dangerous because your audience can get right up to it, or you know, you've got other steers. So one way would be adding a fence to separate the public from the show, you know, from the animals. You can transfer your risk. So that would be shifting all or part of the risk to another party. So this is where insurance comes into effect. This is why we say, you know, you really should have insurance. But there's other things. So in cases of transportation, chartering a bus rather than using personal vehicles, that does, what that does is it puts the liability on the bus company rather than the individuals that are driving the personal vehicles. Or maybe holding meetings in public places rather than in the home. And I know sometimes it's easier to do the two, but again, we have to weigh those risks, and is it worth it? Sometimes we have to avoid the risk. And so that could be taking steps to remove a hazard or engage in an alternate activity. So one example is, you know, replacing a night hike, you know, with a day hike activity. I had one county person, not in Nevada, it was in one of the other states that I worked in. They came to me and said, hey, you know, we've been doing capture the flag at night for years at 4-H camp. We love it. It's a great activity. But every year they had at least one person that had to go to the hospital because one, you know, probably more than that actually, at least one had to go to the hospital, but they would have 5 to 10 that would get hurt because think about it. Nighttime, capture the flag through the woods at 4-H camp. Probably something we need to think about. Another one that's big is dodgeball. Dodgeball is a lot of fun, but if you notice, schools are not playing dodgeball anymore. And the reason that they are not playing dodgeball anymore is because too many kids get hurt. They have other ways to do it. Basically, it's like dodgeball, but they, you know, and I know when I was working with that youth conference, one of the activities every year was dodgeball. And I finally, after I think the second or the third year I was there, I finally said, you know what, we can't, you know, we're not doing dodgeball anymore because these are high schoolers, number one. So they throw the, and it's always girls versus, they always have, there's girls and boys on the teams, and those boys can throw hard. And I think every single year I took at least 1 or 2 kids to the hospital because of injuries from dodgeball. So again, we had to weigh the risks, and we just made a decision to avoid that risk. So we discontinued that high risk event. I know, again, I sound like the fun police. Drives me crazy, but I have to look at this. And sometimes we assume our risk. So we know what our risks are, and we're willing to accept it. That's why we have the risk assumption forms that we require all of our 4-Hers to sign, or their parents to sign. And we also have the for all of our events, we have risk assumption forms. So one example, we take the precautions to conduct the event. So this was an example of a high ropes course. Our 4-H ambassador, or the 4-H ambassadors I was working with at the time, decided they wanted to do a high ropes course. So we found one that had a good reputation, and we went and did that. But if you notice, they all are harnessed in. I do believe they had 2 points of contact, 2 points of contact for the harnessing. They also all had helmets on, and they all had, I think, safety vests, or I can't remember exactly what all. And then they all had to sign an assumption of risk for that company as well as the university. So it did take some prep ahead of time. We couldn't just decide to do it, but again, they wanted to do it, and so we just assumed those risks and figured out how to do it with helping them. Any questions at this point? Just on kind of the definitions of risk management, what's, kind of essentially what we could do. Okay, I'm going to go into some of the specifics about UNR and UNCE, etc. So under the volunteer liability protection, so all of our certified volunteers, if they've done the background check, if they've done the risk, or done the completed all the trainings, they have the application in, you've done the reference checks, all of that, once they're certified and authorized, then they are protected under our university's liability, or the state's liability insurance. Now, what that means is if they're if they're acting within the scope and course of their volunteer service. This is why it's really important that we have job descriptions for our volunteers. And, there's a lot of job descriptions out there, but we need, if you've got an example that we have, or example I've heard of is, you have a leader that's running a rabbit club, and the meeting's at their house, and they are, they're teaching the younger kids about rabbits, but maybe they ask their team leader to go out and mow their lawn. And honest to goodness, this was a real example. We had a leader ask, a team leader to go out and mow their lawn, and that teen was hurt. I don't remember how they were hurt, but that volunteer was no longer covered under the liability insurance by the university because they had asked the team to do something not within the scope of the 4-H program. So we have, so you need to think about some of those, that's why, again, it's really important. The other piece is if you happen to, if you're doing something, maybe you're at the fairgrounds, and you got to move a pig pen really quick, or move panels really quick, and you ask the first person that you see, then those individuals are they would be, if something happened, they would more than likely they would be covered because you, as a 4-H professional, have asked them to help you. Now, if another volunteer asks them to help, that's where you could get into question. But and only if they're moving that pig pen, moving those panels or whatever it is, that's the only time that they would be covered, and you would be covered. And again, I've talked about all of those things. So some special areas of consideration that we have, that we need to take a little bit extra caution. One would be our shooting sports program. We do require a risk management plan be on file with the state, with us, for every club and every county program. You know, we do require that risk management plan be on file. And so that's one way that we have assumed the risk for that program. But you also have to think about some of those other risks, like hearing protection, eye protection, you know, roping off the area for, you know, for your range, those types of things. And all of that is in, if you haven't gone through a shooting sports training, all of that is talked about. And a lot of those pieces are in the policies and procedures that in the shooting sports section. And I know I believe I did send out the new shooting sports policies that were approved. And then the other one would be if you have like any water activities or those types of things, making sure that all young people, you know, and this would be at camp and all of those, if they're going out in the kayaks, then, or the boats, then they need to have a life jacket on. So again, just thinking about some of those areas of consideration. So again, having a risk management plan. There is a risk management checklist that is on the website, on the policies and procedures page, and I'll share it with everybody on this that is involved. You know, I'll have it in the Nevada box, but it's, you know, I think that's, and I'll share it with you guys at the end, but I think that's really important too, is to have that risk management plan or have that checklist there, so you think about all the pieces. You don't have to turn that in for every event. The only ones we require to be turned in are shooting sports, and it's actually more of an extensive risk management plan. But this is just kind of a checklist. But you need the youth and the adults both need to be involved in looking at this and creating those plans, so that everybody is thinking about safety, not just the adults. So some things about chaperones. You know, some chaperones, there needs to be one adult for every 10 youth is recommended. For overnight events, it is 1 to 10 for ages 13 and over, and for 12 and under, it needs to be 1 to 6. And I think that, you know, even in the club setting, that really should be, if you've got, you know, it really should be 1 adult per 10 youth in the club setting as well. Adult chaperones must be at least the age of majority, so that is 18 in the state of Nevada. To chaperone at a national event, then they need to be at least 25. And that is a national policy. For shooting sports, our adult instructors must be at least 21 years of age. You know, but that's not necessarily a chaperone. And you can have adult leaders that are under that age, but they just can't be in charge of the live fire range. And then this is one, and I double checked this. So this is the policy, but it's not necessarily recommended best practices. Unrelated youth and adults may stay in the same rooms in overnight events as long as there is at least 1 adult to 2 youth, but they cannot share a bed. You can never, you can't have, you know, unrelated adults and youth sharing beds. And youth and adults should be, and they need to be the same gender as well. So the only time that they don't have to be the same gender is if it is, like, so this summer I took Cody to watch Leadership Washington Focus, and we were there 2 or 3 days early. And so we shared a room. Now we didn't share a bed, but we shared a room but if it's a parent and a child, or a guardian and a child, then they can share a room. But if they're not the same gender, but you cannot have, you know, you cannot have 3 girls and a male in there. And you really, there's never should be a 1-to-1 ratio unless, you know, again, in the case of if they are related. So, you know, And you should never be in a car one-to-one with a youth. And chaperones should not be in a car one-to-one. And that's really tough, because if you're taking kids home and all of a sudden you realize, oh, okay, I've taken everybody home, but Johnny's still in the car with me, and he's the last stop. So you or the volunteers need to think about some of those things ahead of time. And again, we've all been kind of put in that situation. We need to think about those things ahead of time. Questions about any of that? Are people still there? Okay. Yeah, Sharon, good. That is exactly. You need to have a central drop-off point. That's really the best way to do it, is to have that central drop-off point where parents then come and meet you. Even if it's, I think about, so Sharon, I think about you, if you were coming, maybe you're up in a conference in Idaho and you're coming back down to Winnemucca, you might have a central drop-off point in, as long as you have enough kids in Winnemucca that you'd be okay, but you might have a drop-off point in McDermott, you might have a drop-off point in Norvada, you might have a drop-off point one other spot, along the way, and then you have the drop-off spot in Winnemucca. You can have multiple drop-off, central points, but you need to make sure that, once you have those central points, you don't have one kid left with you. Great. So we need to also make sure, if you have chaperones for camp, for overnight events, anything, that they must have completed the full volunteer selection. So they need to have the application, they need to get their fingerprints done. Those fingerprints you need to leave time for the fingerprints to come back to you. And right now it's taking about 2 to 3 months. I have a meeting next week with police to try to figure some stuff out. But it is taking about 2 months for those fingerprints to come back. So people need to start thinking about that now. Expo, if you've got, our kids the youth are going to have chaperones, and we need to make sure that we have, all of that covered. So in case of emergencies, because emergencies are going to happen, your first priority, or the volunteer's first priority, is to provide medical attention to that injured. One thing that I would like to stress to people, in the emergency plan, in the risk management plan, it talks about calling 911. And in there, and I don't remember if the old form had this, but I know the new form has it for the risk management plan, especially for 4-H or for shooting sports. But this is critical for any of them. Have someone designated to call 911, because when you're in an emergency situation or a panicked situation, I have seen this happen time and time again, where somebody forgets to call, everybody's so worried about getting medical attention that you forget to call 911. So make sure that somebody is designated to call 911, and have that on your risk management plan. When I was in Idaho, we had, every time there was an event and they needed a assumption of risk form, this was a while ago, but they had to fill out this form online. It was their risk management plan. And, it said, details about 911, or I can't remember exactly. And everybody's like, call 911. And I would send it back to them and say, who's going to call 911? Who's going to be responsible? Is there a backup? So think about that. Your next step is to contact the parent or the guardian of that, if it's a youth, or their emergency contact. Whoever's on their form is an emergency contact. If it's a volunteer, if you're not at that event, which you're not going to be at every horse club, or every club meeting, you're probably not even going to be necessarily at every county event. It just, depending on how many your county has, you just can't be at everything. But the next step is they need to contact the county 4-H youth development staff member or extension educator, somebody in the office. And then you, as the 4-H staff person, will work with the volunteer, and then potentially the person that was injured, preparing an incident report. Those incident reports, there are links to those incident reports on the State 4-H website. We have specific forms that we need to fill out. If the individuals still don't want, if they don't want to turn it into insurance, they don't want to turn it into workman's comp, any of those things, you still need to do an incident report just in case something happens. And then the other thing that I would like to see is I would like you to be able to contact me, and it can just be a quick email, you know, within 24 hours of you getting that notice, even if it's on a weekend, because there's sometimes things happen and I don't know about it, but I will get phone calls about it, you know, that within, you know, couple days, etc. So I need to know about those things. And also, you know, sometimes insurance will contact me. The other piece, and I don't have it on here, but you need to be contacting the, if they want to turn it into insurance and, you know, you have purchased the American Income Life Insurance, then you need to turn it into into American Income Life. So on finances, just the things about risk management and finances. There are federal regulations that govern the continued use of the 4-H name and emblem, and they require that annual financial reporting and accountability. Now, I know many of you have not seen that request from us yet. Dan and I have been working on that, trying to get that figured out. But we will request an annual financial report, which the annual financial report form is on our website under policies and procedures. We require that from every club every year. And so I'll put the call out and say, okay, we need to do that. Eventually we're going to get to where they're due at the same, you know, they're due by January 1st every year. And, you know, for those clubs that don't get them turned in, we have the ability to go in and basically suspend their account through 4-H Online, which means that they cannot enroll any more kids. And we can also put the club on suspension until that form is turned in. And so that means that the club can't meet, etc. Because we do have guidelines. And our clubs need to realize, and this is where we run into issues, and this is really where we run into a lot of, when we find embezzlement, is when our leaders don't understand that 4-H money or 4-H things purchased in the name of 4-H or received in the name of 4-H are public. You know, it's public money. We are a public organization. Does that mean that, you know, the state can come in and wipe out all of our club accounts? No. What that means, though, is we are responsible to show the public, you know, how we're using our funds. That's a whole nother session that we'll be talking about all the finances. But again, the money raised in the name of 4-H must be used for 4-H purposes, and fundraising should be conducted to meet a club goal. So clubs shouldn't be doing fundraising just to do fundraising, just to hoard, you know, $30,000, which I've seen. So, you know, but these are all when you look at the risk management pieces, because I mean, I get questioned all the time. Well, I don't think my club's using their funds correctly. How should we use it? Or we had one club in my career that they would do a big dinner every year, and they would raise $25,000. And, you know, again, I had to, you know, I would get questioned by the public about why this was happening. So I would have to, you know how they were spending those funds. Transportation. So you should avoid transportation of only one youth. You cannot use 15-passenger vans to transport youth within our 4-H program. That's actually a university policy. So no, you can use 12-passenger vans, but no 15-passenger vans. And I know sometimes we ask our schools for if they can, you know, provide busing, or if they can, you know, if they have anything. And a lot of the schools still have 15-passenger vans. I don't know why, but they do. And you cannot use that. You cannot use those. A lot of daycares have purchased them very, very cheap. Especially the newer ones are better, but they still are not. They're not safe. The way they're designed, the 15-passenger vans, there's been too many accidents. I had a group of 4-H ambassadors that were coming back from from our, what we called selections, is when we selected our ambassadors. And they were in a 15-passenger van and rolled, and we had one lose an appendage, one lost a finger or multiple fingers, and one had a broken back. Those were the two really bad injuries, but everybody was injured in that. Also, in my experience, I've seen there was a van of Envirothon youth from a school that were traveling to a contest, the Envirothon contest, and the van got into an accident, and I think at least 4 or 5 of the kids were killed. So you have to, you know, they're just not, their center of gravity on those 15-passenger vans are not good. There is a transportation form and a policy for 4-H within the 4-H policies and procedures, so I suggest that you go and look for that. Accident insurance. So primary accident insurance, we provide, the university provides liability insurance. That is not if they get in an accident. That is if the volunteer is doing something, you know, if something happens, the volunteer, if they're sued, the university will protect them in court if they are, you know, within the scope of their job description. It is highly recommended that you purchase insurance for supplemental accident insurance for our 4-H members and for our 4-H volunteers. It is super cheap for all projects except for horse and ATV safety. It is $1 a year. For horse and ATV, it is $2 a year. And what that does is, again, it's a supplemental accident insurance. I tell all parents that ask me that question, it will cover your, it covers your, your deductible. It'll pay up to, depending on what you get, it pays for up to, I think, $2,500. But I've had 4-Hers, I had a 4-Her one time get kicked in the head. Sharon, the new policies and procedures were supposed to be posted. I sent them to Ashley last week. I'm going to give her 1 or 2 more days, and then if they are not posted, then I will send them out. They were, like I said, gave them to her last week, and I know she's trying to, she gets stuff done as she receives it, so I know she's working on it. But if she doesn't in the next day or 2, I will get them sent out to everybody. But essentially with the accident insurance, you know, I had a young person get kicked in the head by a horse when they were hoof blocking their legs or their hooves, and the had to go to the hospital in an ambulance. Came back and I didn't know any of this was happening, but came back, and our horse superintendents allowed her back on her horse, and the horse got spooked, and then also she also passed out and fell off the horse again and had to go to the hospital again in an ambulance. And same day. American Income Life, which is the next, I'll pass this. American Income Life is the company that we tend to suggest to people to go to. You don't, you know, because they are the $1 a year, the $2 a year insurance. They paid both of the ambulance rides for that young person. They are very, very good to work with. I really, you know, and they're a strong supporter of the 4-H program in general. So, you know, they actually have, if you've ever gone on their website, they actually have their own like cooperative extension 4-H division within American Income Life. So, you know, it's one of those that you don't have to go with them for accident insurance, but, you know, it's the one that we know of. The other thing is if you're doing a special event, so when we do 4-H Expo or 4-H Capital Days, we will go to American Income Life and we will purchase special event insurance. It's like anywhere from 20 to 30 cents per person per day. And it, again, covers up to 2,500. It covers, it does cover some loss of life. It's got all the information on the website. So, but you should be doing that for any of your special events that you have. And, you don't have to cover all of the spectators there, but I would try to do as much as you can afford. And you just do that through the website. Okay, so just a couple of things. I'll let you guys read through these, but essentially you need, here's some risk management activities, some risky situations. I want to get to the essential elements piece. You can see some of the risky situations that we have. Let's see. One of the big ones, one of the things that we say that, 4-H is open to all. If you have a club that decides that they are full and, so they don't take any more members, but then after that date, then they allow more people to join, then that is an issue, and that's a risk management issue. So that's why when we say a club is full, they cannot take any more members, period. So you have to, that could lead us into a lawsuit. So again, financial and a reputation risk. So, and then here's some quotes about risk management. So we've talked about risk management. We've carefully thought out all the angles. We've done it 1,000 times. It comes super natural to you. You know what you're doing. You've been trained to do it your whole life. There's nothing that can possibly go wrong, right? We need to think again. So our little beaver did not do so well with chopping down his tree. And again, risk management, it's all of our jobs. And so, I love this one with the little mouse. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Any questions about risk management? Okay. Like I said, I am going to share with you I'm going to share with you guys both the risk management plan for shooting sports, as well as the checklist that has been put together. So those will all be in the Nevada box when I send out the recording. So the other piece, just to, if you ever have any questions about risk management, if you ever want to have those conversations, just call me or email me. I'm more than willing to talk through them. Okay. And the last part that I want to talk about, we're going to totally jump gears. We're going to talk about 4-H essential elements. Oops, again, I did it wrong. Okay, so with the 4-H essential elements, what this does is, this is kind of one of our, I would say it's one of our youth development theory. It's something that I feel is really important for our staff to have a good understanding of, because it really tells us why we're doing what we're doing and how we should approach working with our young people. So the piece that I want to remind everybody too of is, all of these PowerPoints and all of the sessions that I do, I try, if I don't feel like they're appropriate for volunteers, then I will let you know. But most of them, I feel like if you wanted to then take these and do the same presentation with your volunteers, feel free to do that. When you're talking about essential elements, this is a great 15 minutes before a 4-H council meeting, or during a 4-H council meeting. This would be a great lesson to do. So essential elements, you're going to see it in a variety of ways. You're going to see either 8 essential elements or 4 essential elements. It's exactly the same thing with 8. They've just taken 2 of them, combined them into 1, and made it the 4 essential elements. I tend to talk about the 4 essential elements because I think it's a little bit easier to understand. You can also remember the acronym, the big M. So BIG, belonging, independence, or generosity, big M for mastery. So we're going to talk about each one of these. So when we look at belonging, that is really knowing that they're cared about by others. You know, kids want to feel like they belong to an organization, that they, you know, and that's really what gets people, and volunteers as well, you know, when they feel like they belong. So some strategies for helping our young people feel like they belong is encouraging peer group cohesion. So having icebreakers, games. You know, I know that social time is tough at times because, you know, I think about, so 4-H council meetings, that's probably the big one. That is the 4-H leaders' social time. That's when they get together. And, you know, they always want to stay and talk afterwards. And, you know, for us as staff, we just want to go home because we've been at work all day. You know, most people don't go home between, you know, work and 4-H council meetings. And so, you know, but you have to remember that, you know, and so you have to give them a little bit of time. I don't say that you need to stay there all night. Say, okay, you know what, we're getting 15 minutes of social time and then we're heading out or whatever, you know, but we need to make sure. Encourage the cross-age linkages, those staff-youth bonding. Now, I know that sounds a little strange, but, you know, you're going to find throughout your career, there's kids that, there are young people that are, become very special to you. You know, I've got, from my very first job in Extension, I had a group of teens that I was, I worked with our teen council. You know, I mean, I'm 23 years old doing this, and I think about that and what an experience, you know, and I've remained very close with several of those individuals. Now it's, you know, more friend basis because they were only like 5 years younger than I was. But, you know, and then I've also had kids that I have taken kind of under my wing and really tried to mentor. You know, I had one young lady that just came from a rough situation, you know, rough home life, but she was very involved in 4-H. And so I made sure I figured out a way that she could go to every event that she wanted to go to. You know, I'd either, sometimes that, you know, I don't suggest that you do this, but sometimes you might have to pay a little bit, or we would find scholarships for her. I would make sure she got there, you know, if I had to take her myself, etc. And so that to me was really, really important. And, you know, I see what has happened to that young lady now. She is just an amazing, you know, went into the service after she graduated and just completely changed her life. She could have gone down a totally different path. And so you're going to have those bonds with individuals, and it's okay to have that. Encourage ties with the family and the community, you know, making sure that they understand, you know, that they're involved in their community, and make small group time available to allow that development. Some other ways is encourage collaborative and cooperative learning. Not everything has to be, you know, competition. Have fun, you know, shooting sports. Maybe, you know, you have the county match, but then afterwards you have just a fun shoot where everybody's having a good time. Show respect for the value of diverse cultures. And that is not only just, you know, we think about that. We need to think broadly about culture and diversity. It's not just racial or ethnic diversity, but it could be where they live. It could be their religion. It could be their sexual orientation or their gender preference. All of those things we need to think about. And you may not agree with them, but you need to, you know, everybody needs to show respect for that. They, you know, not belittle them for those things. Provide multiple opportunities for youth to develop relationships with adults, you know, and then encourage supportive peer relationships. So mastery, this is to feel and believe that they are capable and successful. It may not be that they are, they may not master, they may not be perfect at something, but they've learned how to do it. I really struggled when the 4-H Essential Elements was being developed. I was actually part of it on both at the state level and at the national level. And I felt like, the word mastery, I finally had to, like basically compromise on the word mastery, because to me it means that you've mastered something, you're perfect at it, and that's not what this means. It really means that you've tried it and that you're competent. So you need to mix hands-on activities, projects, or exhibits with applied or contextual or work-related challenges. So that's where that workforce development comes in. We really need to try to weave that in as much as we can. Develop multifaceted approaches. It might be that they do a group investigation, experiential learning, or that there's multiple outcomes. I think that that's another important piece. Focusing on the long-term goals of learning. So one example I always share with people on this lesson, or on this one, is, so when I was in college and I was doing my student teaching, I student taught in an ag ed class. And I mean, I'll admit, I student taught in probably the best ag program in the state of Idaho. At that time it was. Probably still is, pretty close. Teacher had been there for 35, 40 years. This is a group of my senior class that year. There were 10 of them in the senior class. 8 of them got over a 30 on their ACT. So you can just kind of tell the way this was just the way the school was. And we were going to an ag mechanics contest, the district contest. And on the ride over, all the kids were like, oh, we want to, they were excited about it, talking about how they wanted to beat their biggest rival school, etc. We get done with the contest, and they were in the van going back, and everybody's just bummed, and they're like, oh. And I said, what's wrong? Well, we didn't win. And I said, okay, because they got second place. And I said, what did you guys tell me on your way over? Like, what was your goal for the day? And they said, we wanted to win. And I said, that's not what you told me. Think about what you told me. And they said, oh, we wanted to beat this rival school. And I'm like, okay, where did that rival school place? And they were like, 3rd place. And so it was just also reminding those young people about what their original, what their goals were. It's not all about winning. Sometimes it's about, sometimes it's just about achieving something. And that failure, it was okay to get 2nd place because they had still achieved their goal. They had still done very well, and so they have to think about those types of things. Independence is knowing that they are able to influence people and events. So this is really, this is where kids are growing, and this is where we can affect them a lot. So some strategies, maybe before making decisions, we need to ask ourselves, can a youth make this same decision? If it's a club thing, or clubs, the youth should always be involved in the planning of club meetings. And so you need to make sure that that your volunteers understand that your volunteers should not be setting the agendas. They should not be giving the reports. That should all be youth driven, with adult supervision and adult, they can be guiding them, but they should not be doing it. Include youth in planning discussions and encourage input. I always think it's really important to have, and I've been trying to get youth on some of our state level committees. Now, granted, it can be tough sometimes, but your leaders council, you have teen leaders in your community, or a lot of you do. They should be involved in that, in your leaders council. They're leaders. And so, we need to think about that, and not just 1 or 2. If you've got 1, they're not going to talk unless you've got a very outgoing person. But if you got one teen representative, that you're not going to get very, very much input from them, unless you specifically ask. And then they're probably, I've seen it time and time again where they're not very open. But if you've got, and even 2 can be tough at times. You want to have, it really should be equal amounts youth to equal amounts adults. Now, again, like I said, that's tough to do, and it doesn't, I'll admit, on the state committees, we're not even going to be close to that. But I'm trying to get at least 1 or 2 per area. Asking a youth to do something rather than telling them to do it. How many of you at home find better results if you have children. Find better results if you say, would you do this, rather than you need to go do this. I find myself doing that, you know, I find myself trying to do that more and more, because I don't, I forget that. And so, you know, and when I say go do this, I don't get the same response of would you. And again, you know, commend youth who recognize their limits. If you have a young person who has dropped the ball on something, make sure that you're aware that it's going to happen, you know, before the day of the event, or the night or the day before the event. Make sure you're keeping, you know, you're making sure that they're doing it. But if you know that it's going to happen, say, you know what, I really appreciate that you, and then they come to you and say, I can't get this done. Recognize that, be okay with that, and say, you know, what can you do next time to help alleviate this issue? Again, some others, you know, you can see some of the others, you know, don't jump in too quickly when you're working with young people. Let them try to problem solve first. Let them feel that thrill of overcoming that obstacle. And that's tough to do, because you just want to jump in and do it, but let them try it. But be there and be ready to help them understand why it failed or what they can do differently. And then generosity. So this is practice helping others through their own generosity. So this could be, this is where our teen leaders are very strong, you know, with the mentoring or the tutoring, you know, service projects, where they can tie their learned skills and abilities to how they can use it in positive ways. You know, we work in some of our communities, we work in juvenile justice. And what a great thing, you know, one of them, we worked with boys that were incarcerated, and we taught them robotics. And these boys are, you know, thinking robotics, but then those conversations led into, well, how could you use this once you get out? And not to hotwire cars or those kinds of things, but how could they use those skills to get a, you know, to enter the workforce? And, you know, giving opportunities for young people to think about the feelings of others. This is, you know, when we talk about the civil discourse workshops that we've been doing over the last year, where we have teens come in and talk about issues that are tough for them to discuss, but they need to think about those feelings of others. You know, I know we have this conversation at my house a lot about, you know, you may not agree with their opinion, but you need to, you know, you need to understand that that is their opinion, and, you know, you need to respect that they have their opinion and you have your opinion. And so essentially, you know, our youth development experiences can become transformational when we provide our young people with the opportunities to belong, to master skills through experience, to influence others, and to learn that meaning of service. So there is curriculum on essential elements. And I think I did double check this website, and it is still good. If not, if you just type in 4-H essential elements, you'll get some information. I've been unpacking the boxes. I know it's only been 4 years, or almost 4 years, but I've been unpacking the boxes that I brought with me from my previous lives. And I did find the other day curriculum that was created at the national level to teach both volunteers and staff about essential elements. And so that is also still, I think, available on the 4-H Mall website. But if anybody is interested in doing that type of a training with your volunteers, then just let me know, and either, you know, I'd be willing to help, or, you know, I can give you the curriculum. It's very easy. But it is, you know, there's some good pieces to that. All right. Any questions about, and then I've also got a couple of handouts that I'm going to be sharing with you. Actually, I can show you what so there's one, and I kind of like, you know, I kind of like this one where you can at least, it's just a 1-page. So this is just a 1-page essential elements. It talks about, you could share this with your volunteers. And then I have another one as well. This is from Purdue that talks about the essential elements. And again, you can, and I'll be sharing both of these with you. And so you can use those with your volunteers. But that's just one, I always like to weave in kind of our theories, why we do what we do. And this is one of those that I think is really important to have an understanding and a ground level understanding of essential elements. All right, I've got 10:32, so I only went 2 minutes over, which I think is really good. Any questions from anybody? Everybody's all right. Well, I will get this converted, and then I will get the Nevada box sent to everybody so everybody has access to the documents. And if you have any questions about these topics, do not hesitate to call me. That's what I'm here for. These are the types of things. So if not, everybody have a great rest of the day. And I appreciate you guys joining me. Sometimes I wonder if anybody, and I've had these sessions before in my career that nobody's joined. So I always like it when at least 1 or 2 people jump on. So, and everybody stay safe, and hopefully we don't get too much bad weather. I know Frances said it was kind of snowing at her house and in Cold Springs, and it was pouring here in Reno. So I'm sure it's doing it across the state. So everybody be safe. Probably Cindy's the only one that doesn't have bad weather. So, all right. Well, thank you, and have a great rest of the week.